Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen for Honeybee Stamps, and in today's card project, I'm going to be creating this really clean and simple card. I'm going to be using the On the Farm layering die set, and in the packaging, you get examples on how these pieces layer together. Now, I did speed up the video a little bit because I'm going to be doing quite a bit of die cutting right now. I'm using that packaging as a guide, and I literally laid out all of the pieces just like they are shown. And then I went through my scrap pile and I just dug out pieces of cardstock that would match the packaging. So I'm really just going to follow the examples that are shown. Now, of course, with the Honeybee Stamps layering dies, they provide etching on the actual die cut pieces. You'll see on the house when I bring it up close that they have some etched details on there that really add to the house. Now, to be honest, I really wasn't sure what kind of card I was going to create. I just knew that I wanted to play with these houses, and I really love how they came together. I love the colors, but of course, you can change up your colors. You can have a white house or a dark blue house. You can customize this to fit maybe the colors of your house or maybe a friend's house if they just recently moved. Now, in this particular set, it does create houses and different structures to create a farm. And I decided not to go in that direction. I did go through and die cut pieces to create a farm, but I ended up not using them today, and I will save them for future projects. So after I had finished cutting all of my pieces for the house, I went through and layered them together just like the packaging shows, adding the trim and the roof and the windows. And then for the windows, there's still openings. And I wanted to make it look like that someone was home and have the lights on. So what I will end up doing is trimming down yellow pieces of cardstock to fit behind my windows. But I think this would also be really cute if you took some vellum and maybe just colored over the vellum with a yellow Copic marker, and that would give you more of a translucent or just more of a hint of color behind the windows instead of this bright yellow that I decided to go with. And there are just tons of different ways you could use even just this one house. You could create multiple houses, different colors, create a little town. You could use these for a spooky house just by changing the colors and the background that goes with the house. So you could really use these for all year long. I did also go through and create the windmill that was on here. I just decided to go through and cut most of the pieces and adhere them together. Like I said, at this point, I still wasn't really sure what I was going to do. So the windmill, I had die cut the base piece from a dark gray cardstock. And then the smaller piece, the top of the windmill, I did from a light gray cardstock. And I'm using liquid glue and my tweezers to do all of my adhering. It does really help to have a fine tip to your liquid glue because I think that helps control how much glue is getting applied to the die cuts. And then I moved on to the barn. So I did this in very traditional colors with the dark roof and a red barn. Now, if you notice too, I did not do any ink blending to my die cuts, which I usually add some sort of color, but I just decided since this was the first time I was playing with them that I would just go through and adhere them as is. And they still completely look amazing. You don't have to add color to them if you don't want. Just by changing up the shades of cardstock that you use can also create dimension. So after a little bit of fiddling off screen, I decided I was going to go with just the house and turn this into a welcome card. So I'm using the rectangles, stackables to create a frame. I took a pretty small one and I'm lining it up in the center of a white piece of cardstock. This cardstock measures 4¼ by 5½, and I'm adding some tape to hold my rectangle down, and then I'm going to run that through the die cut machine. Now I also have a piece of white cardstock here cut to that 4¼ by 5½, and I lined up the frame so I knew exactly where my window would be. And I'm taking dried marigold distress oxide ink and a blending brush and just lightly adding a hue of color to that background. Now I can bring my frame in and just kind of get an idea if I have enough ink in the right place, if I need to add a little bit more, but I was really happy with this, so I set that on the side. I'm taking my frame and I'm going to add some foam tape behind it to pop this up a little bit. Then I'll remove the backing on that foam tape and attach this over the front of my cardstock. Now, if you have a slick surface like I do, a glass mat, I would suggest maybe securing that bottom piece of cardstock down to your surface with maybe some tape so it doesn't slide all over the place when you're trying to line your frame up. So now I can start adding my scene together. And like I said, this is a really clean and simple scene. I know I've seen examples of die cuts or the layering die cuts where they have these beautiful laid out scenes and they are really gorgeous, but sometimes they intimidate me. And by just taking a step back, playing with the die cuts a little bit and the layering and how they layer together, and just starting really simple, it gives me more confidence, quite honestly, when working with them. And I don't have to really go all out and make a huge scene on the front of my card, especially if I'm going to be making a welcome card. I can just do something really clean and simple. So after I have my scene laid out, I need to do a sentiment. And I have a sentiment stamp here that says no place like home. Some really beautiful sentiments on here. I chose one and I have that spare piece of cardstock. This is actually the piece of cardstock that came out of my frame that I die cut. So I'm using my Misty tool to stamp the sentiment. I haven't used this before, so I'm going to condition that stamp by just rubbing my hand over it. It's going to accept the ink a lot better. And then I'm stamping this down in the Honeybee Stamps Intense Black ink. I'll stamp it twice to make sure I have a really good impression. And then I will use the coordinating die to die cut out the sentiment. I also die cut out the sentiment about 2 or 3 more times, and I layered those together to create dimension to add to the front of the card. Now, another couple ideas that I had while I was creating this would be really great to add onto a tag. If you're giving a package, maybe you're bringing over some food or a bottle of wine to somebody who just moved into the neighborhood or bought a new home. This set, even just using something as simple as the house and trees, would be really great to add to a tag and give as a gift. So I just went through and added liquid glue to the back of my sentiment and added that right underneath the center of my house. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed today's clean and simple card project. I want to thank you so much for joining me.